to join us with Beth Comstock and about a whole bunch of you villagers and founders in the portfolio. So welcome, great to have you with us. With me is Beth Comstock. She was vice chair at GE, longtime fixture in the Valley, in fact, which we'll get more into later, and an LP and supporter of us here at Village Global. So we're very grateful to have her involved. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask Beth a set of questions, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, and I might call on a few of you who have signed up to jump into the conversation and put yourself on video and chat with Beth directly. We'll do this for an hour, and so we'll be about 30, 40 minutes of conversation and a bunch of question and discussion. Just to start us off, if we can start with a quick icebreaker. When I say go, I want you to go into the chat window in Zoom and type in a phrase or a word or a sentence about something you're grateful for right now. So when I say go, you can type it in, but don't click enter until I say go. So think about something you're grateful for, a word, a phrase, a sentence that represents gratitude. Type it in and then go. Click enter. Let's see what you got. Family, friendship, Colorado, babies, health, good health. Yes, a lot to be grateful for. Online communities. No one said Zoom yet. We probably should express some gratitude for Zoom for bringing us all together. Dogs, hat tip to Duncan. I like that. Awesome. Okay, so Beth, greetings. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Ben?
Excellent, excellent. Let's start with it. Just get everyone level set on who you are and your background. What was your job at GE, and what was sort of, by the time you left, what was that portfolio? Such a vast empire. Some of us on this call might not have a full appreciation for the extent to which GE runs our world. So we'd love to hear just in a minute, what was your job there?
Yeah, well, I left GE at the end of 2017. I was vice chair. I led innovation and the commercial, sort of chief commercial and marketing officer. And in innovation, it was our ventures team, as well as I led a couple of our businesses, including our lighting and some of our new digital businesses. So my role there was, at the end, was to really seed innovation, to partner and seed new businesses from that big platform that was GE. A lot's changed since then. GE is not quite as big as it was when I was there. I spent my whole career, unlike all of you, I didn't go off and start my own thing. I tried to be an entrepreneur inside a big organization, but I grew up in media and then came to the GE side mid-career.
And I just see in the chat, Kyle was an intern at GE.
Yes,
Energy. So
Kyle.
we probably have some GE alumni here as part of the group. What were a couple of your major sort of signature accomplishments or projects, Beth, from your time at the company?
Yeah, I think the ones I'm most proud of, I think we led into clean tech very early. We launched something called Eco-Imagination, which was a really powerful platform to launch new products that were ecological and economical in the industrial side. My last stint at NBC, I had 3 of them, but was to help digitize NBC. We had some bombs, but a good thing that came out of the bombs was we launched what became Hulu, so that was good. And then at NBC, at GE, I think just getting us on a digital track and helping to initiate the digitization of industry for GE and its customers. Those are 3 things I'm particularly proud of. And we just did really great storytelling. I think above all, I just felt really proud to be part of the team that I was to tell the story, which to me was about strategy.
Yeah, and we're going to get into some of that and the lessons learned and what you can share with this group about storytelling, building a brand, how to do deals with big companies from a BD perspective, and a whole bunch of other topics we'll get into. Beth, maybe we can start then by just sort of jumping into some specifics. One of the stories you've told around your new book in the last couple of years is the time that Steve Jobs tried to recruit you to join his pirate ship. Tell us the story of how that went down. What was the pitch, and how did you decide to turn him down?
Yeah, the answer really is there. They came after me twice, and I turned them down twice. And you see the trajectory of Apple versus GE, so you can decide. But it was not the right place for me. But I was at NBC at the time. I was leading digital, and I got to work with Apple. We were doing a lot of digital distribution deals. That was in the early days of, would have been 2006 to 2008. So it was just as like iTunes was coming alive. And they approached me, hey, you want to come and work for us? And I have to say, Steve puts on some really good moves. I mean, the first time I wasn't talking to him directly, it was someone who worked for him. And I come home and my cell phone, I find that Steve Jobs had left a voicemail message for me saying, you should come here. It's really great. It'd be really amazing. So he got involved, and I had to interview with him. And so
what was the job? What was the job at Apple that they were recruiting?
It would have been a job in iTunes.
Okay.
It would have been working with Eddie Q at the time. And I actually wasn't liking my job at NBC. It was the toughest job I ever had, but I liked content. I felt if I had a future there, it was much more about content than it was about the technology side. I wasn't so prescient to yet imagine that Apple would be a content company. And so then 6 months went by. I was more miserable at NBC. And I got a call from Steve saying, hey, I thought of something totally different. And what he wanted me to do was come and do something with them with clean tech. And so he said, next time you're out here, and I was spending a lot of time in San Francisco, can you come and we'll take a walk? The famous, will you take a walk? So we walked a little bit around the campus. It was the old campus, and mostly sat in his office. And what was really, I haven't talked about this much, but was really kind of weird was he said, come with me. And so he took me into a meeting with his leadership team. And he's like, hey, this is my friend Beth. She's going to come and work for us. Well, he hadn't put anything in front of me. We hadn't talked about anything specific. And there's Tim Cook. And I just remember Tim and some other, and I was like, hi. Anyway, I didn't take that job either. And I remember my husband and I sitting down at the kitchen table, and we were doing the math, and I was like, really, how good can their stock be? Really, is it worth it? I had a daughter in high school, and honestly, the end of the day, everybody there's like, he's tough as hell. But you're going to do great work here. And I wasn't intimidated. I just didn't feel like I could do the kind of work I wanted to do. I just didn't have a gut feeling about it. I think the culture of no turned me off a little bit. They're very tough critics. It's more about what you can't do than what you can do. That was my impression. And I didn't feel I'd be able to take the risks and chances I wanted to for myself. But I really regretted in many times not being able to work with this great legendary CEO. And so as time went on, I will tell you, there were many times I thought, oh, what an idiot that I said no, certainly when the stock and GE stock, but really in the end, I said no for all the right reasons. And I never regretted that because I did my homework and I went on my gut, and it, for me, was the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's the tactic of meet my friend Beth. She's going to come work for us prior to you agreeing to that. Is kind of interesting, yeah.
It's classic, right? We've all come to learn, classic, but it was a little creepy.
And now, I didn't know this actually, Beth, until we chatted this morning, that you're on the board of Nike with Tim Cook. So I guess there's circling back to, you have a different opportunity to get to know at least another legend of the Apple story.
Exactly. I've gotten to work with Tim there for a decade on Nike, so that's been great.
That's awesome. So let's zooming into G a little bit. We have on this call, a lot of startup entrepreneurs that would love to do business with G in some way, or an analogous large enterprise. These global companies that have been around a long time, huge bureaucracies, and if you're CEO of a 10 or 15, 20 person startup, and you're trying to do a deal with one of these sorts of companies, what lessons or insights would you share, having been on the other side of that table, to the startup entrepreneurs with us here today?
Yeah, well, I helped us. We seeded GE Ventures specifically because we realized one, we wanted to partner more with startups. Two, we wanted to invest in them. Three, we wanted to be a launch pad for partnership with startups. And we realized how hard it was. So part of our venture team was there was even a team we created that was kind of like relationship managers, if you will. Their job was to help startups navigate, because it's like exciting when you see a big company. On one hand, it's exciting to think of the market opportunity, the speed to customers and technology. It's daunting when you figure out, what door do I go in? Will I ever come out anything? Will they eat me alive? All those things. And any of you who have worked with a big company, many of those things are true. Big companies, even on their fastest, best day, they don't move fast. And so we came to realize we needed to set up a sort of a speed lane And it was everything, Ben. I mean, it was even having to work with finance to just get different terms in terms of how we paid startups. If we were going to do business with them. I mean, you're not able to float a company for 90-day payment terms. So there were just a lot of things that have to be changed. So I think we all recognize it's not easy, but there are benefits to both sides. We knew at GE we'd be better by learning from startups, by getting the speed they had, by getting the ideas they had and take them to our customers. So we both agreed there was benefit. I think that's the first thing I'd say. Don't waste your time on companies who don't see value in what a startup, or worse, that they think they can do it better than you. And that's probably the first thing you'll hear from most companies is, oh, good idea, but we can do it better here. That was a lot of the challenge this team had to fight. No, you can't. No, you really can't do it better here. I remember our medical team sat on a ultrasound technology forever because they were convinced they were going to do it. Meanwhile, a whole market opportunity opened up and they never did it. And so we saw that. And so that's one thing. So hopefully you can go to a company that has some kind of seasoned, if not venture innovation team that's poised for that. Make sure you're very clear on the rules of the game. One of the startup founders I worked with had a really great practice that we tried to incorporate. He was like, hey, look, if we need more than 3 meetings just to come to an agreement that there's some possibility here, we're not in, because it's just too much time, energy, resources distracted from us. So that would be another watch out. Is
that's interesting. Sorry, the front end of it. So you say if a big, because this happens all the time to our companies, in a sense, a big company reaches out, hey, it's some mid-level BD person at Coca-Cola, or pick your big company. Would it be wise for a startup founder to say at the upfront, hey, I just want to be clear, I would be respectful of your time and ours.
Exactly.
If it takes more than 3 meetings to figure out whether this is even a real possibility, this probably isn't going to work. And do you think that would be an advisable opening gambit?
I think it's something like that, to just say, let's be realistic. Because what you're trying to do is, when you're sussing out, does this person have any juice? Are they just on a fact-finding mission and they're wasting your time? Which often happens. Their job is to quickly bring together the people who can get action on behalf of this idea. What's the idea? Hopefully it leads to a pilot project. So that would be the next thing, yes, we have an agreement. There's one thing we want to do. You work through all the who's going to pay for it. We can get into that if you like. And then after that, I'd say be careful of pilot hell, because that's the other thing that happens, small company to big company, is you do one pilot and then they're like, let's do it for 5 other divisions. Before you know it, you're still not able to launch what you want. So again, I think put some boundaries in.
How do you know who has juice inside of a big company? Because I think are you working with somebody who can make decisions, fast track your project, approve budgets, et cetera? From the startup perspective, any tips for discerning where power really sits in these organizations?
Well, that is why I like often venture innovation teams, because that is their mission. I would say beware of getting too cozy to the CEO. Yes, you need the CEO as a champion, but I've seen way too many startup founders who are like, like so-and-so CEO chairman, I'm like in with him or her. It helps to have that person as a champion, but they need to then give you to somebody who's going to have that juice to get you through. Because often what happens is, just because the CEO says it doesn't mean XYZ business unit leader is going to take it. The incentives aren't in place. So there are a series of questions I think you would ask. This P&L I'm working for, how are they incented to make sure this is successful? Do they, how is this project funded? Out of whose budget is it coming from? I think a CFO is often a good person to ask to bring into the mix of the partnership, to make sure some of those issues don't sideline you, because often it falls apart because, well, I thought you were paying for it. No, you're paying for it. At GE, we always had growth funding. So we had a centralized pool of money at the center that was aligned to make sure we could pay for these, and that also the business unit had to put money into it as well. So you'd be wise to ask how some of this stuff is getting funded.
I think it's an interesting observation when you say be wary of leaning too hard on the CEO's blessing. It's a bit counterintuitive, but I think that's profound, because there is this sort of tendency of, an entrepreneur is at a dinner with, 6 executives, including the CEO of GE or whoever, Nike, and they have a 5-minute conversation in which that CEO says, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. And then they take that and think that that's political currency inside their own sales process. And of course, to some extent it is, but unless it's a really hardcore endorsement and ownership at that level, ultimately you're going to be working with people lower down the organization who might in fact feel threatened or offended
Exactly,
by
Ben.
you going over them.
Exactly. You got it. I won't name the company, but I know of one specific company in the healthcare space that was a brilliant company. And because our CEO he used their success, he got to know them very well. We made an investment in them, and he wanted them to partner with the health division. And he used it as a cudgel, basically, to hit them over the head. And that team resented it so much, they refused to work with this startup.
That psychology
it finally
is
worked
tricky.
out, but so in that case, this CEO was right to get an investment, but he should have spent more of his time on the business unit CEO and addressing those questions than the big company CEO.
Right. Yeah, there's sort of a related theme, which is around like the effectiveness of name dropping, the perils and promise of name dropping. So I'm going to switch, and Ferris, I'm going to put you on the spot in a sec. I want to switch, talk about storytelling, building a brand, building a narrative for your company. This is something that you're renowned for, Beth, and would love to get your insight. But Ferris, maybe you can turn on your video, unmute yourself, and ask the question that you put in the chat.
Sure, I'm suffering from some bandwidth issues, so I'll keep my video off if that's okay. But I read an article recently around the transformation to GE Digital. I'd love to find out more about the messaging and the marketing that drew that compelling sort of storytelling to your end customers, and how it turns out that I think initially GE's approach was to target multiple different segments for that digitization, and they scaled it back and just targeted industrials. Is that correct? And what are the biggest takeaways when a startup is navigating different market segments and crafting different stories for different segments?
Yeah, we can come back to why I didn't, but I actually didn't read that Wall Street Journal article, and I don't intend to read the book. It just takes up too much space in my brain for where I want to go. But I will give you my.
I like that. That's the ultimate power move, Beth. I like that.
But I got enough sense from people who did read it, and I kind of got a sense from the journal reporters who reached out to me a day before they printed the article. Look, here was our basic premise. GE needed to. We saw the digital revolution coming. We had seen it in media. We saw it coming in health and energy, and we saw it coming to industry. We were early in seeing it, and we had a good strategy. And we moved very aggressively. This was, we had gotten out of GE Capital. There were a host of reasons that this was going to be the future. And so Jeff Immelt and the leadership team was all in digitizing. And it's one of those classic cases where you have to make the market. At the same time, you're building the product and building the teams. And GE hadn't done a lot of that in recent memory. Most of the industries we had helped build with the aviation and rail and other businesses were a long time ago. So we were very aggressive in making a market and positioning ourselves. The first thing you have to do is educate your customers. What do we mean by digitizing industry? You have to make it very simple. What does it mean if your jet engine tweets, like, for example? So we spent a lot of time. Again, if any of you want to follow up later and lessons learned, I'm happy to go deeper. For the sake of time, I'll condense it here. And we put together a very good marketing effort. I'm really proud of it, but there's a couple of lessons learned from it. By good, I mean a couple of things. Messaging. We had to message, be very clear on basic words. Digital industrial, what does it mean? Internet of Things, the digital industrial, the industrial internet. Being very specific about words, because you're educating a market, investors, customers. I'd say the other important thing we learned is that not all customers are the same. And so you ask about industry segments. What's even more important, I think, was that not all customers are at equal maturity. And so I felt really good about the work we did to understand customer maturity. We did a lot of customer maturity models. It took us a lot of time. We wasted a lot of time going to customers who were never going to go there first. And so we had to get very savvy at almost diagnosing our customers and going to the early adopters first, expecting project payment, but not any sort of very little revenue and probably no profit. And so you have to work through all those kinds of things when you do that. Frankly, you guys know intuitively that's what you do. That was new for GE. We were creating this second lane of what's next. What I understand the journal wrote, and I think I don't know since I didn't read it, but were we overly aggressive? We got ahead of ourselves. Did we get the message out before the product was built? Yeah. I don't know anyone there, you want to raise your hand, who haven't done that? I mean, part of what you're trying to do, and I don't think the traditional GE investors understood this, was that you did need to build the message. I'm a big believer on mind share before market share. And we did that well. Did we take it too far? Yeah.
So what is that? So how do you build mind share? So for these early stage businesses, they're trying to develop a narrative about why they exist in the world, why they're doing what they're doing, and of course, ultimately deliver a crisp value prop to customers. Any tips for how to think about that undertaking or exercise? I loved your point on you have to, oftentimes you're having to educate, especially for these cutting edge tech startups, you're having to educate folks and define words and get away from buzzword bingo and actually create substance underneath some of that vocabulary. Anything else you'd say, Beth, in terms of building that brand?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of having a really good story that you're constantly refreshing, but you're just out there all, for us, digital industrial, and you had to make it real. We had to be able to show prototypes. We had to have clever metaphors. Again, what happens if your jet engine tweets? I mean, so you have to do kind of the very ephemeral.
Sorry, are you saying that what happens if your jet engine tweets, like Twitter tweets?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Like,
if your jet
try to
engine
come
is
up
tweeting.
with clever, and then we had to come up with very hard-nosed, logical, no unplanned downtime was our value proposition. So you have to pretty clearly say, what's the value proposition? We could offer you a million things, but right now for industrial customers, we're going to focus on the fact if you're in manufacturing, you're not going to have your factory line and energy or your power plant and energy go down in a way that you haven't planned for it. So to Ferris's other point, let me just also say one thing. I do think this is a GE, but especially a big company problem. We threw too much money at too many things. I think that is a fair indictment. That being said, we were also very bold. And what big companies do is what we call premature scaling. And I've seen this with startups that I've been involved with, where your investors just throw you so much money and they ask you to do so many things and you do it. And so, yes, but part of that is the natural part of the process. So there's a tension there. So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great thought. Lesser startups raise too much money, premature scale. Village Global startups, of course, raise just the perfect amount of money and perfectly scale and constantly learning. Andy from Electra Labs, would you like to introduce yourself and ask Beth some broader career lessons?
Sure. Hi, Ben. Do you still want us to do the brief intros?
Yeah, you can do it, and you can say a bit about your company, and then ask the question. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Beth. Hi. We work with collecting biometric data remotely. So imagine you're in a clinical trial and you don't want to come into the site. You want to send in your blood pressure, temperature. This we were all doing pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and now everyone's doing this in trials and whatnot. So.
Not yay COVID, but yay that they realize the need.
Yeah, finally, it's good. I think better patient care for people. I guess something I've read a lot of different chapters, and I've admired you a lot from afar. So this is I'm kind of having a fangirl moment. But I guess when you were younger, what are some of like the pivotal moments that you had that you wish you had told yourself something different? I know people give like advice like broadly, but do you have certain moments where you're like, I made this choice, but I kind of wish I had thought about it in this way?
Yeah, well, I guess I would say, I think for me, I just was a constant, to be very personal, just a constant battle with confidence. And, I should have been more confident. I remember I got the CMO role. Jeff Immelt tapped me to be CMO. I'd come out of NBC. I didn't go to business school. And I remember he called me into his office at one point. I was 6 months into the job. I had done all my research. I was really trying to get a grasp of what did it mean to be chief marketing officer. And he's like, hey, what's going on here? I put you in this job for a reason. I expect you to have ideas. I don't see what led me to put you in this job right now. You've lost your confidence. Get it back or else. And so I thought I was like doing my best Meryl Streep. I thought I was really good. I thought I was acting really well. And here he was calling me out. And so, those kind of things. And that makes me think, Andy, of the other thing is just, I wish I had asked for more feedback earlier. I came to appreciate as a leader, and hopefully all of you have feedback as part of the way you lead your teams. But I wish I had asked for more feedback earlier in my career. I actually think it would have given me more confidence, but it would have also allowed me to address the things that were holding me back. And I had a couple of tough interventions, not just that one, but others where people said, you're getting in the way of us and you better fix it. And one in particular, I remember I had to go into the team and go like, I heard you. I need your help. Well, that was so hard to do because I thought I was supposed to be this great team leader. I was supposed to have all the answers. And really, I wasn't asking for their help.
So you went to people who reported to you, Beth?
Yeah.
Like and you said, I need your help on how I can improve?
Yeah, they all gave feedback. It was part of a process and it was not good. I mean, they gave me some good stuff, but it was mostly not good. And I had to call them around a table and go, I heard you. I need your help. It was a pivotal moment for me. So Andy, I wish I had appreciated that earlier and not expected to be such a know-it-all. I would have accelerated myself a lot more, I think.
That's fantastic, Beth. How, just on the confidence point, how does one improve one's self-confidence? There's a lot of, the startup game is so challenging for many of us because there's a sense of imposter syndrome where we're running these fledgling enterprises, 7 months of runway in the bank, you're going in and pitching, big companies, say like a GE, and trying to pitch yourself as this great company that's going to stand the test of time and change the world. But of course, internally, there can often be a lot of doubt and anxiety about the real viability of what we're doing. I guess, so I hear you, I love the example of Jeff Immelt saying, I hired you for a reason. Were there other sort of processes, practices, superstitions, self-talk, narratives, books, or just celebrations of wins? I mean, what are other ways that one can develop a sturdier sense of self-confidence?
Yeah, I do think getting those feedback loops are really helpful. I think you need the immediate ones, you need the anonymous ones. I mean, one of the questions I learned to really like is tell me something I don't want to hear, because usually you don't. And there are mechanisms to do that. So I think that's a good way. I mean, it sounds counterintuitive because like you don't want to hear it because it'll wreck your confidence. And let's face it, there's some days you really don't want to hear it. But what you're doing, I think, is you're building trust, you're building more openness, and the team's able to come forward and you're able to say, let's solve this problem as a team. So I think
that be anonymous? Is it anonymous? Do you say, sorry, I love that example about tell me something I don't want to hear. Do you just go up to someone on your team and ask them that in person? Is it an email? Do you do it anonymously? Or like, what's the best?
I think you're doing all the above. I think you need to work into it. So I think just like walking down the hall and go, yo, Ben, tell me something I don't want to hear. I think you got to work up to it and find the right, I think anonymous is good. I think one-on-ones where you're just getting to know the team. Like, for example, I worked in marketing and innovation, and I never met an idea I didn't love for at least 10 minutes. And it drove my team crazy because behind my back, they called me the dog from Up. Now, I didn't see the movie. I thought that was cute, but I realized it meant I liked every shiny new thing. And for a long time, they didn't tell me this. And finally, one of them got brave and said, we call you the dog from Up because we don't know how to prioritize all these ideas. And so I had like, what a gift. Oh my God, like I didn't expect you to go work on that idea. I just said I liked it. Well, they thought that was go do it. And so I had to learn how to just prioritize, even if I thought I was being clear, I wasn't. So that was a great example to say, I love this idea, don't do anything with it. If you're interested, let's talk. I love this idea, go do something. So just something
That's
simple
great.
like that.
What do you, Beth, what do you think of the book Lean In and sort of the reception it's gotten over recent years? And sort of in that vein, what advice do you find yourself most commonly giving younger women in business who are starting off their careers?
Yeah, I love that question, Ben. I actually think more women might be asked that question. So I like that you've asked it. I was glad when it came out. I was glad for the conversation. That being said, I think it put pressure in some respects in the wrong place, because I think women, minorities, people who haven't been as privileged are the last people who need to do all the work to make sure that things are better for them. So I helped start the G Women's Network, and 12 of us came together and we worked our asses off. But we would look around and go like, hey, we got families, we got jobs, we got stuff. Where are the guys helping launch this women's network? And I saw it with our African Americans and on and on. So I liked that Lean In got the conversation. I wish it would. I think the lean into yourself is like, are you standing in your way? Fix you. Like, you always got to do that. But we needed more people in the system to lean in. I'm really encouraged with Black Lives Matter that I do think people are waking up to the realization that they must lean in. We can't expect just Black people to solve this problem. And I think it's the same for women. And anyway, I could go on, but I felt it put actually too much pressure on women. And I think things have changed even since then.
Brent Franzen, I want to put you on the spot. Beth, you're on the board of Nike. You care a lot about health and wellness. And Brent had a question for you. Do you want to introduce yourself, Brent?
Yeah. Hey, Beth.
Hi, Brent.
Thanks for taking the time. So I'm the founder of a company called Most Days, but we're building a social network that helps people hold one another accountable and routines that improve their life. And I think one of the things that I'm always curious about is clearly like your trajectory has been meteoric. So you're in a highly competitive environment, and like you're rising to the top at the different companies that you've been at. And like, you're also a mother and like you're managing a personal life as well. Like, what are the things that you're doing each day that you think contribute to that? And I'll just give you a quick example for myself. I think when I started and when I came to Silicon Valley, I really thought like sacrifice everything and just work 18 hours a day. And that's how I'm going to be successful. And what I've realized is, as I sleep well, or if I take care of myself physically, or like I'm connected to my family, I'm actually more productive. Like, those things are not mutually exclusive. And so just curious about like, how do you think about a typical day to maximize productivity and be the person and kind of show up in the way that you want to personally? Like, and how do you think that's contributed to your success or hurt your success?
Yeah, Brent, I love that question. And where I'm sitting today, I have a much different perspective than what I actually did. So one, I don't think anyone would ever call me a role model of balance in kind of any way, to be honest. I was very ambitious, worked a lot. I like to work. My family benefited, but I also know work got more of me than my family did many times. I've made peace with that. Hopefully my kids are not too terrible. They're grown. They turned out well. And to the things we're all talking about now, I think COVID has accelerated our discussion of this. I mean, someone just said women should be able to talk about their desire to start a family. I mean, it's really pressuring, especially women right now, to realize you can't do it all at this moment. I can't hold my baby and be in the Zoom call. And so we're expected to be these people. And I think this is hopefully a breaking point, and we are becoming more aware of it. So what have I done now that if I could go back in time and whatever I do next? I do think sleep is important. I actually have a meditation coach because I'm trying to get less anxious, and I've been investing in my own creativity. These are things that I always thought someday I would do. And I think I would have been much more effective if that someday was then. And there's always a reason why you can't do it, but that reason usually isn't very good.
So you feel, just quick follow-up. So you feel that if they're not mutually exclusive, like that you would have been able to have the success you had, yes, while kind of being a little bit more balanced, that it's not one or the other.
I believe I could have been even more so. Because at the end, I was so burned out. I don't know what I was running on. I, have health issues and things like that. That's not good. That's really not good. I worked with a colleague, a woman executive at GE, and she was very clear. She was like, do not call me on weekends. I'm with my family. Obviously, if the business shuts down or something, call me. but do not call me. She was very good with boundaries. I was not very good with boundaries. Call me anytime. I'm on, so things like that give you that space. So I saw people who were successful by doing that. I don't know why I didn't do more of it. Partly it's that ambition, partly it's the drive, and partly I just don't think I was thoughtful enough about it.
Thank you.
Beth, you said,
and I guess Brent, can I just say one?
Yeah,
like, I do think there's a fallacy. Like you guys, like your company is you right now. You are your company. I worked for a big company and was still in that role, but I'm just saying, you do need some perspective, and you really, I've seen a lot of people burn out to the point where they haven't been able to take their company to the next level. I'm talking about startup founders, because they gave it all, and then when they had to go to the next level, they weren't there for the job. So I do think you owe it to your company, not just yourself. Sorry, that's my
I think
speech.
you said, that's great, Beth. You've said in your book or elsewhere, learn to trust your doubts. And you mentioned at one point, like, my gut told me not to take the Apple job. And I'm just sort of curious the role of intuition. I have a friend of mine, also another small LP in Village, Orrin Hoffman, who says, trust your gut in the negative, but not the positive. So his theory is, when your gut's telling you this isn't a good person, this isn't a good opportunity, listen to it. But when your gut's telling you this is awesome, you might be falling prey to shiny object syndrome. So be a little more rigorous in your thought. That's just a perspective. I'm curious, what do you mean when you say learn to trust your doubts, and expand on intuition's role in your thinking?
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, your intuition is just a voice. It's not the only voice. I like for the Apple job and other jobs, I have other decisions. My process is really, I will take a lot of input. I'll ask anyone whose opinion I think could help me. My husband, unfortunately, gets most of, he's like my in-house therapist, but, and I'll ask people, and then I'll sort of take it in, and I just do old school, pros, cons, questions. I even say to this day what I went through with the Apple decision, because it was so vexing for me. And then I go, okay, I've got to make the decision. My husband can't make it. My boss can't make it. I have to. And I go to sleep, and I wake up, and I say, when I wake up in the morning, my clear head is going to tell me what to do. Decision made, I'm going to move forward. And I think that's key. You're not moving back. You're not going back and replaying it. And then the other thing, one of the things I feel like I struggled with, and GE struggled with, our CEO struggled with, is optimism to the point that you're trying to control and force things to happen. And again, I would imagine, I think startup founders, this happens often, right? You see the future. You, by the will of your energy, you are going to make this happen. Well, sometimes it just doesn't work that way. And so the optimism gives way to kind of blindness. And one of the things we called at GE was, it sort of led to, we called it success theater, where people always just wanted to believe in the success of something, and they weren't able to think about the reality and back to the feedback loops. So I think that listening to only the good voices, sometimes it forces you to a series of actions that are not very realistic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, that's helpful. Hey, Nate Wine, do you want to ask your question that you put in the chat about selling to, I think this is on the minds of a lot of folks here, Beth, big companies can be slow to move on emerging technology. What's the best way to sort of pitch a big, bold, risky technology? Nate, do you want to elaborate?
Sure. Hi, Beth. I'm Nate Wine. I'm co-founder of Floodlight. We're a data platform for financial advisors to align money with values. And we have a couple of pitches now into some larger banks and one smaller one. And we've struggled a little bit in the marketing of saying, do you want to use us to rebrand as this new and innovative company? Or do you want us to kind of fold into your mission statement that's already on the website that already kind of feeds into what the board of directors have said? Do you have a strong feeling one way or the other, what works?
Well, I think it depends on the customer, and I'm sure you've done some customer segmentation. If I were I don't know enough about your company, but I would first start with, segmenting your customers to understand the outcomes they're trying to drive, the relationship they want with their customers. I would imagine for the innovative customer segment, to show they're partnered with a new hot innovation company that's creating the future. I'm just making it up, Synchrony Finance powered by, I'm sorry, what's your company's name again?
It's Floodlight.
Floodlight, it's a great one. Synchrony Finance powered by Floodlight, that shows they're innovative. For others, Chase, JP Morgan Chase, they probably want to just show everybody they're doing it themselves, so they don't want you. So maybe there's a way to do a bit of a diagnostic with the customers to understand what they're trying to accomplish with their customers, understand their brand and I'm sure you've done that, but that's how I would have approached it. Is that helpful?
It is. And when we pitch it in person, like because some of this of what we're doing is Teams, and we'll see a couple people in the room or in the Zoom rather that are excited, awesome. And then you see the other ones that just sit there with, I don't understand this and I'm not going to like it. Does it matter so much how we pitch to that one person who may be the naysayer, or should we always just stay on the optimistic side?
I guess I would try to focus on, it's like politics, focus on your base to carry you through, but you do need to go after the undecided. So I would use that opportunity to say a bit of, Nate, you look concerned. What are the concerns you have? I do think that criticism is helpful because you need those people to help you be supportive. If just the optimistic innovation forward team is like, yay, and they're not listening to them, they're going to work hard to derail you. So you want to try to win them over. My only caveat would be that there are some, to me, I found in most settings, change happens with your teams in like a third. Your early adopters, your show me people who need some proof. And then there's the group that's just they don't like change. Maybe they need education, maybe they need help. And some of them just don't like it. So be a little wary. Some people you're just not going to convert. And again, I think by asking questions, maybe ask if they could be assigned to work on the project with you. Could you talk to them separately to understand their concerns so that maybe you could address some of that? And beware, because sometimes the teams are competitive. The go get them teams like, oh, don't talk to them. They're sticks in the mud. They're always saying no, but I want to hear that. Maybe you have to be the force to kind of bring that along. That's a lot to ask in a sales pitch, I know.
Yeah, and just to further riff on this, Nate, it's an interesting idea because I think there's certainly a benefit to seeing the facial expressions. You said the person's face in the room is like they seem skeptical. To me, the even harder situations are where it's a mystery. You're actually not sure where people stand. So there's 4 people in the room and they've asked a bunch of polite questions and there's sort of good, decent engagement. But what's sort of the next step? How likely are you to close this deal? One thing we've been doing when we've pitched investors for Village is the line I've been deploying recently. I'll say at the end of the pitch, based on these last 40 minutes of conversation, what are a couple of things that you're most excited by when you hear our vision, and what are a couple areas of concern or question or to dig deeper, and just by almost going up to the meta level, it's really helpful data. Because basically by the severity of the concern that they articulate, you can get a sense for just how likely are they to close. And then of course, whatever they say is the thing they're most excited about is the area that I follow up on and amplify and follow up.
I love that. I also think, I think that is such a great example. And to further what Ben said, if you can do it in the meeting, also as a follow-up, back to the feedback loop, send a quick note to all of them to even follow up further, I think would be helpful. And some of that you could even do anonymously because maybe they didn't want to tell you in the meeting.
Sure.
Beth, what book are you wrote your book, Imagine It Forward, which is great. What book other than your own are you most often gifting or recommending to people?
Well, especially to founders, I love Phil Knight's Shoe Dog, and not just because I'm on the Nike board. If you haven't read that book, it's being made into a movie for Netflix. It's a great story, but it's just your story. I mean, it's your story. He couldn't even make payroll, and his future wife never cashed her checks. I mean, it became a love story. I mean, it's so beautiful.
If you've read Shoe Dog, put it. Go ahead in the chat and type in if you've read Shoe Dog. I'm just curious. I know it's one of the best-selling books. If you've read Shoe Dog, go ahead and enter that in the chat. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so Shoe Dog's one. Any other books?
I think to the discussion about feedback, I really like Kim Scott's Radical Candor. I think that's a really great kind of business leader to tell you and to encourage the earlier experienced people in your team to be good at feedback. I like Scott Belsky's Messy Middle book too. I think that's really helpful for those stages when you're like stuck, and for all of you get to those stages. And I think his book's very, very helpful there too.
On Radical Candor, which I exchanged some notes with Kim. I actually haven't read the book yet, but I've read some summaries of it. Do you think people deep down really want honest feedback? Like I have a mental model when sometimes people say, hey, do you have any feedback for me, Ben? And I just get the sense that I'm not sure they actually want the hard truth. How do you sort of ascertain whether someone's ready to hear the truth?
Excuse me. Well, I think a great leader works at being open enough to hear that, so that you don't have to ask that question. Do they really want to hear it? So yeah, I think that is, and part of what I like about the book is she gives people scripts and she tells you how to think about it, and that's really helpful. And I think all of us, no one taught us this. Like HR doesn't teach you this, business school doesn't teach you this. So I think none of us have been taught how to do that, Ben. I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, how do you, when you've coached people on your team to be better at soliciting feedback, like are there, like do you believe in the, what is the shit sandwich or whatever, the, you know, the compliment and the piece of negative followed by compliment, or do you have a sort of a framework or structure for giving feedback like that?
I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I think make sure it's balanced, that you have both the positive and the negative. I don't know what order. I mean, most people that I know who are ambitious and want to do well only listen to the negative stuff anyway. That's all they fixate on. I think you have to communicate it several times, because what we think we heard and what we go back and reflect on, often you put it in writing, it seems a lot harsher, so you have to schedule more follow-up time. So I think it's an ongoing process. I think it's not a 1 year and done thing. Like your annual review shouldn't be once a year, it should be ongoing. One of the things I did with one of the teams I worked with is created something I called our culture club. And it was a way to, we said, we can't change this whole company's culture, but we can change our team culture. And our core tenet was honest, open feedback. You bring me stuff and I'm going to bring you stuff. And my commitment was we were going to act on it. So I think that's the other thing. People can give you feedback, but if you don't do anything about it, they're not going to believe you care.
Yeah, one thing that I've been trying to do more of, although I frequently forget, but is state the intention of why you're giving the feedback before giving the feedback. You know, my intention in sharing this with you is to help you understand how you might be showing up to someone else, blah, 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 rather than just jump right into the feedback, especially if it's negative, it can be interpreted in difficult ways. Beth, who are the people who most inspire you right now in business and life and politics? Like who are you looking up to and drawing hope from?
Well, I've been very removed this past 6 months. Like not just COVID, I sort of pushed the reset button this year for myself, which worked out because the world hit reset. But really trying to dig in on my own personal creativity, my own reflection. I've been doing a lot of writing, so like I'm really inspired by poets these days, and writing. So. From a business perspective, I mean, John Donahoe just took over as the head of Nike, and many of you may know him from Silicon Valley. He was I think a very good mentor from his eBay days and ServiceNow. What I like that he's brought to Nike is real empathy, and he's really reached out to employees and just been doing these like nonstop, 50,000 employees at a time, one-on-ones. So I've been really impressed because I obviously as a board member, I get to see that. I've been pleasantly surprised by that. That's maybe one example I can point to. And if I can just jump in, Beth, for those listening, you can check out, I think Sheila's on YouTube, our masterclass with John Donahoe, his friend of Village Global. And my favorite part of the advice John gave our group of CEOs is on how to fire someone effectively. And he role played it by making me the person who was being fired, and he played the person doing the firing. And I just always remember his go-to line is, the line he kept saying is, "I've made my decision." I think in his world, a lot of times, you know, people will push back. "Oh, let me try to change your mind. I've made my decision that now we're going to talk about your next chapter that's not going to be at this company." But he had it down to a science, exactly how to architect the layoff conversation. And he has hundreds of those sorts of management frameworks for every scenario in business. So it was a really interesting conversation. Yeah, and that's a good one. I think his style is to solicit a lot of feedback and then say, "I've made my decision," not just in firing you, but just in business decisions. So he is one who always looks for feedback. I was always big at GE and bringing outsiders to spark us. John's naturally that way, looking, and frankly, Nike needed it. They were a bit insular. So the fact that he is that way, I think, is helpful to them.
I'm curious, and if we're almost out of time, folks, if there are any other dying questions or comments, please put them in the chat and I can call on you. But Beth, I'm curious, you know, you're in a phase of your career where you're sort of reflecting and so on. For folks who are in the middle of it all, they're in the trenches right now, they're working constantly. Any tips for how to create space to do a little bit of that reflection? Like if you could go back and do your GE tenure again, I know you talked about balance perhaps at a more macro sense, but just creating space to reflect on how are things going? How am I feeling about the quality of my life, about the trajectory of my business? Like, you know, is it journaling? Do you read poetry to then create a space of reflection? Do you, like, for me, it used to be, no, I've done this in a long time, to get on airplanes and look out the airplane window
Yeah, I
for a
love that
couple
too.
hours, like New York, San Francisco, that's like 4 hours of thinking, just looking at the clouds. But you almost, you know, I always struggle with tactically, what do you do when it's time to reflect? I mean, were you sitting in a chair looking at a blank wall and trying to think about things, you know, because otherwise we can get trapped down distraction and Twitter and other things that aren't actually creating that space. Any tips to share on that?
Yeah, well, I think just in general, carving out time to think, like literally carving it out of your schedule, whatever that is important. Encouraging your teams to have time to think alone, and then time to think together. I'm when I put my book together, I started that Julia Cameron from The Artist's Way, that practice of morning pages. I still do it.
Oh,
I
so
think that's
say
very
more
helpful.
about that practice. What is that practice?
It's just, you get up in the morning and you just write like 2 or 3 pages of just stream of consciousness, what you dreamt about last night, worries you have for the day, what was bugging you yesterday. It's very therapeutic. It's helped me become a better writer. I know it's helped me become more innovative because I can't capture ideas. I think that's been very, very helpful for me. The other thing that I want to mention, it's sort of counterintuitive, but I'm really big on making room for discovery. To me, it's like the joy of work. It's the joy of life. We don't think about it in a work context. When you're carving out that time to think, hopefully you're also making time to discover. You know, you're trying to disrupt an industry, a competitor, and often you think you don't have time to discover, but you must, I think, get out there and start to see where things are weird, where trends are happening, get good at pattern recognition. So to me, that is a thoughtful way of tapping into your curiosity, almost playful, like you're discovering kind of what's new, what's next, and you're getting good at insights and trend spotting. And I believe everyone must do that. You can't just delegate that to your strategy person.
Do you think it could be, like, I'm trying to think, for a startup CEO, is the right way to schedule that? Like, do you take like a day a month and commit it to randomness and serendipity? Like, you know, we all get inbound, or many of us get inbound requests for our time, or we reach outbound to folks, and it's sort of the random variety, right? It's not a core strategic priority. And so it never feels like there's a good time to do that phone call with that random person. But perhaps if I know the VC Brad Feld used to do this. Now the VC job is a little different than the startup CEO job, but he used to call them random days. And once a month, he'd book these 20-minute meetings from like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on a Friday. And like all of the random calls and catch-ups that he was going to do, he just stacked them all back to back. So the batching really worked for him. You know, another example, another person involved in Village, Reid Hoffman, would often do like 3 breakfasts a week. Like the breakfast slot was the random slot. So if you're doing a breakfast meeting, you're probably not on a short priority list, like an active project list, but it's a way to, hey, a professor from Penn's rolling through town. Sure, let's get breakfast, you know, and you might be breakfast 5 months from now because that's the next open slot, but that's sort of the aligning of physical place and a time of the day with that sort of discovery work was more manageable than trying to slot it in at 2:30 p.m. before and after these other critical day-to-day meetings.
I love that idea of random day. I'm a beneficiary of Reid Hoffman's going to breakfast with people, because that helped us really get started in Silicon Valley because he was open to have breakfast with an industrial company. So I think one of the things, I think you do have to somewhat schedule that. Field trip Fridays was something I did with the teams I worked with. We go as a team to discover some of these things. It's how we came to really appreciate the digitization of industry, the maker movement. We went and hung out at the time with Bree Pettis of MakerBot, and he had a maker space in Brooklyn. It leads you to all kinds of discoveries. Invite people in. I call them sparks, people who come in and kind of spark a conversation. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Just call up people and say, I have 5 questions for you. I'm in this space. I'm at Floodlight. I want to know, I have 5 questions for you. Most people are honored to be asked for advice. especially from a startup founder. They feel, wow, that's good. So yeah, I think you do have to plan for that.
Beth, in close, we have a diverse portfolio. Of course, you're an indirect investor in all the people on this call. So we're honored to have you involved in every of these companies. But are there a couple, just to wrap up, a couple of themes that are top of mind for you these days? Topic areas, trends that you're excited by, just so as we can think of some of the companies on this call and the broader portfolio to connect you with, or folks here can keep their eyes.
Well, if I can ever be of any things we've talked about, if I can be of assistance to any of you, you can get from Ben or Sheila my contact. Happy to talk. I mean, I'm really continue to be interested in clean tech, health and wellness. I've especially advised a couple of folks who are doing more functional medicine, meditation. Those kinds of things are quite interesting. I will also say one last thing we didn't talk about, but I think for all of you, one of the things I've just been really thinking about now that I've been away from a company is just story as strategy, and story as your brand, and story as your product. And as the CEO of your company, hopefully you're spending an equal amount of time on your story. What is story? Story is where you came from, where you're going. It answers why you. And so I've been thinking, Ben, a lot about story, just the stories we tell ourselves, the myth, the stories that are behind a good brand, why we believe them. And so I don't know that there's a tech company doing that, but I'm just intrigued these days about that as a theme.
I think it's a fascinating theme, and the best CEOs are world-class storytellers. And where my mind goes is in the tactics of how does one get better at that skill? And maybe that's another session that we can do sometime, because it's quite a superpower that can be developed. And I do believe everyone can become better in this domain. It's not something
they must, don't you think? I think every CEO, you've got a lot of hats that you wear, but you're the chief story because it's your strategy, and you have to keep refreshing it.
Storytellers in chief. Well, Beth Comstock, thank you so much for your time,
thank you
for your
all.
supportive
Thanks
village, and everyone, thanks for joining us. And until next time, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.